money makes things easier, but it's not the be all and end all, because you can have a small amount of money and be as happy as a clam. You can have a lot of money and be as miserable as fuck.
Hey folks, this week I got a chance to sit down and interview one of my people in my faculty, Heather Gardner from Foundation Training Australia. What an amazing lady. She has had a journey which is super cool. Over the last 40 years, she has gone from starting out in a country town, love, divorce, growing a business with her partner to 200 million and plus, buying an aeroplane, to divorces and restarting again. 7 children, 17 grandchildren, you name it. What an amazing conversation we had this week, and Heather shared her success stories, her failures, her lessons from an amazing life. I hope you enjoyed this one this week. Heather Gardner, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jace. Thanks for the invite. Very privileged to be here.
Been looking forward to chatting with you for quite a while, and I just want to lay the scene as we sort of set out today, because I would define you as maybe like an unsung hero for entrepreneurs around Australia. Like I've known you for a number of years now, and your story is amazing, and I want to sort of dig into that today. But I just want to lay the framework before we get the conversation started. You know, you've been an entrepreneur for many, many years, created with your partner a very successful business into the 200 million and plus turnover, hundreds of team members, mum of 7, 2 biological, 5.
I know, I'm fucking tired just thinking about it.
17 grandchildren, and I think you're on your 3rd entrepreneurial journey in business right now. An absolute inspiration. So I just want to lay that foundation early up front here, because if people sort of look for you online or on Instagram or Facebook or Facebook,
somewhere,
they wouldn't see this story. But that's why I wanted to dig into it today. But
happy days.
As we kick off, sort of let's reverse right up. And so, when you were, a young woman, did you ever think, was there ever any thought in your mind at some point you'd be an amazing entrepreneur, you're going to go after it, or did it come accidentally? Where did it start for you, this entrepreneurial journey? Take us back, school, wherever it was.
Well, thank you for that. That's obviously quite an intro, and as we've talked about before, I don't see my story any different to anybody else. I'm certainly not defined by what I do. It's just the things that you do. So if we think about what happened sort of early on, I never had any entrepreneurial. It wasn't even fashionable back in those days in my time. But I always knew that I had capabilities that I didn't know exactly what they were. I wanted to be a lawyer. God, I don't know why the fuck I wanted to do that in my younger years, but I always loved that learning, sort of capacity that job would take.
Yep.
That didn't end up being that way. I went into real estate, and I was just a receptionist back in those days. It was a lot easier to get jobs then. And then I got into banking and finance, so I worked in ANZ for sort of some time.
Yeah.
And I loved the finance side of things, because ultimately, be it on the commercial or the residential side, you were actually supporting people to live their dream. So I learnt a heap, got paid shit money back in those days, and I decided that there was very little progression. You either had to be a mobile, as they called it, and you were female, so that didn't, sort of work very well. So I took a punt and applied for a job at CSR, building materials. So at the time they were merging both their divisions. Used to be PGH, or Poo Gone Hard as we used to call it, Poo Gone Hard and Monia. And I actually said to the sales manager, I've got no experience in doing what we're doing, but I come with a great attitude and, a can-do, sort of scenario.
Yeah.
Anyway, I said, every now and again you got to bet on a rookie, and I'm that rookie. And he did, and I did really well, in that space. So I guess if I look at, when you do look back and reflect on your life, you go, I went and worked in the factories to understand how the product worked.
Yeah.
and being a female in the building industry way back then, you'd get on site because you were a chick. But if you didn't know your stuff, you were going to get kicked off site pretty quick. So went and worked in the factories. The guys at the time gave me a really hard time, put me in the fucking paintball tin and came out looking like a bloody, dot ball. But every day I showed up.
Yeah.
And
you kept coming back.
Yeah. So every day I was back there. And by day 3, they actually went, okay, this bird's actually not going to leave.
Yeah.
So we'll actually work with her. And it was the real turning point for it's that connection with people to say, it doesn't matter what you're going to do to me, but I'm committed. So either get on the fucking bus or get off. Either way, I'm still going to be here. So
where do you reckon that tenacity came from? Was there something in your childhood, like mum and dad, did they sort of treat you tough, or was it just something innate? You were like, no, I'm going to take life on, because it is an interesting story because, you're a country girl. Yeah. And often I grew up in a country town too. It's you kind of like fit in. Don't stick out.
Fit in or fuck off.
Yeah, that's what it was, right? And I had a similar feeling, when I was growing up in the country towns, like, oh, I don't want to be here forever. Was there something in there for you like that?
Yeah, I suppose, everyone has some things that define them, and I had an older sister, and, she was sort of the little princess, I suppose. I was a bit more of the tomboy.
Yeah.
And my family didn't end up with a son for, sort of 8 or 9 years after me. So I was always the one that was doing, the work, I guess. And yeah.
You're the oldest?
No, I was second. So I'm now the oldest. My sister, was killed in a car accident. But it was just one of those things that I was just, I'm sure I was born a little tough nut, and you have to defend yourself. So I was, maybe I was put on this planet to actually, defend those that were the undefendable, and most of all, that was probably me. So yeah, I just had this, attitude that, and that probably started way back because my parents sent us to a public school.
Okay.
And my sister went to Casterton High, and I can't even remember how old you are when you go to high school, and down there it was, sort of forms. But I decided I didn't want to go to the public school. I wanted to go to the private school, which was Monterey College. It was an hour or so away. And so I trapped foxes to pay for my, tuition.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I guess it was innate that I was always doing things differently, thinking differently, and that's what you have to do in life, let alone in business. So
to make it work.
Yeah, so I don't know whether or not that was, the key to all of those things. But anyway, that's what I did. And again, it's not until you reflect back and you go, what defining moments actually made those defining moments?
Yeah.
But I don't think there were any particular that defined. You just did, you just did what you
need to do.
Yeah, what you thought was right before your mind sort of became a bit polluted with all the other shit that carries on in the world these days,
As we get a bit older, we absorb some things maybe that aren't that great, but we'll maybe dive into that in a little bit. But CSR, it's the start of something for you that sort of headed you in a direction, a journey, whatever, So in CSR, did you progress through? Was there a career there at that point? You were like, yeah, I'm going to pursue a career here, or there's something you're going to sort of grab onto or go after?
So I obviously had, high aspirations, and at the time, my first husband and I, we'd sort of separated and divorced, sort of some time before that, and I was just really good in my space, and it was really quite funny because, I was a young chick at the time. I think I was, sort of 27, 28 years of age, and we were a bit, sort of off men. So in the building industry, that was a bit of a handy thing. So any events I went to, I'd turn up with, a girlfriend. So even back then they thought I was a lesbian. I'm not. I like men. I actually had really high aspirations, and then my second husband and myself, we ended up we were doing sort of a lot of work together
in CSR world.
No, well, he was a builder and I was in CSR.
Got you.
And it was sort of our coming together was quite odd because I actually invited some guys from Hutchies at the time, and Gary was at FK Gardner. Invited them to lunch, and Hutchies declined. They said yes, and on the day they declined. And I was sitting at the top at Picnic Point in Toowoomba, and I thought, oh fuck, what am I going to talk to him about? And I should just cancel. And anyway, I rang his office, and I was told that he'd left. So we ended up having lunch, and as it turned out, we had a bunch of things in common, and we chatted for hours and hours, and then the rest is history. We ended up
romance flourished,
romance flourished, and then I ended up Gary only had a sort of smaller business at the time.
Yeah,
they were only doing sort of a couple of $1 million. They had a small team, and I got offered to go to Sydney with CSR, and I obviously bet on a relationship over a career at the time.
Picked love at that point.
Yep. And then Gary said, why don't you come and work in the business? Because obviously I had the business, the finance and so forth at the back, and then sort of some business skills. So we ended up becoming sort of quite a good working
life partners and business partners. Yeah. So at that stage, had you had both of your children at that stage?
Yep.
And
yes. So Tammy and Andrew, I had.
Yeah.
And then when Gary and I came together, we were like the Brady bunch plus one. So he had 5 children.
So he added 5. You brought 2, and then you were a family of 7.
And all the kids decided to move in with us. So I'm not sure quite how I drew that really tiny short straw, but it was amazing at the time. Like when you come together as a couple, we'd only been together for 3 months, and then he had 2 little people, tiny people, and then the 3 older boys decided to move back in. It's like, wow, this is and I was I think at the time 30 or 29 or 30, and so I went from 2 to 7, and it was like, oh my God, my womb shrunk, and it was like, oh, how am I going to do this? But you just do, working full time and have sort of all the kids.
Well, and that's part of what I wanted to sort of maybe chat about today, because I think the great unsung heroes are the mums of the world, right? And whether you agree with it or not, they end up being lumped with the majority of the domestic support around the house. And, then take care of the children too. And then if they want a career, try and fit it in if you can, but, good luck with it all, right? So, and from what I can tell with our discussions, you just pulled your, big girl britches up and went just hell for leather for the whole thing. And, a bit of inspiration, for other, entrepreneurial women listening in, mums or whatever it is right now, like it can be done.
I seriously don't know how the fuck I did it.
But maybe sometimes, would you agree with something like sometimes it's no good to overthink it, or you just got to get the fuck on with it?
Yeah, and I actually think it's probably more challenging for the women now because there is so much noise or, infobesity around, what should I do, what shouldn't I do?
Right, wrong,
and I think this is and it's, be it right or wrong attitude at the time, and I'm obviously sort of on the other side of 50 these days. Back then, you just got on and did it.
Yeah.
And I didn't have sort of a lot of family support around, and and it was, you look back and you go, was it tough? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Were you challenged? Fuck, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you still did it.
Yeah.
And we got to the stage where, we actually had a nanny come in of an afternoon.
Yeah.
They weren't live-in, but, they did some of those things that you couldn't be there to do, the homework and get them bath, but let's all sit down and have dinner type stuff.
Yep.
That's very fortunate to be able to do it, and it's not like the childcare stuff these days. But, it's just it's one of those things, and I often reflect back and go, the only time I actually had to myself, and I hear that a lot with my the daughters and daughter-in-laws and things in my life now, and they go, oh, there's no me time, and it's like, suck it up, princess. Sometimes that's just the way it is, and it's not right, because the guys can still go and do what they do, but the time I got was, when I was on the toilet, and then you'd have kids coming in,
knocking on the door anyway.
And It feels like a long time, but
Yeah.
it's actually a short time,
time.
when you reflect back.
Yeah,
so.
when you look back. And so for you guys, you chose love, added another 5 kids to your family, all living together. And then say, well, we've got this business. Gary's got a business. Let's work on that together. Tell me about when, you guys started working together and then there was these opportunities that came along, and how did you guys take advantage of that together? Because really a couple of $1 million turnover business, and over a decade, grew to a $200 million turnover business, and amazing opportunities and experiences and stuff along the way. But sort of, how did it really get started for you guys in that sort of space? What was the
the catalyst, I suppose? We were quoting on ablution blocks or toilet blocks. That was sort of the extent of what we were doing at the time, and some sheds and sort of other houses and sort of smaller scope projects. And I think the catalyst really came, when the government, sort of bought out their pre-qualified supplier status. I'd been working with them on the steering committee, so we were able to do.
You were in on the ground
and
level.
I'm not sure if that's sort of like an in-house thing, but it's so many years ago. Who cares? We got to be able to position the business where it needed to be to leverage those things, and we just leveraged it, and I guess pressed the areas that we needed to be able to press. And construction has its challenges, as anybody, any of your listeners are listening. Anyone in construction knows that there's the ebb and flow of those things.
Yes,
and you're actually at the mercy of the tender process. And if you're the cheapest, great. If you get the gong, but if you're not, you don't. So you can spend a lot of time doing a lot without getting the rewards. So.
Yeah. And so in that tender process, it was really around that mining world, really, where you guys got a bunch of great contracts, really, at the end of the day, and that sort of that mining boom really started you guys in that direction. Is that kind of where it started, or did it sort of lead into that?
There was a multitude of areas, and I think a lot of the time you can look at your business and as you're growing, and anybody that's grown significantly over a period of time, you actually just strap on and go, are we doing it right? Fuck, I don't know, but we've got money in the bank, so happy days. And you still have that mentality because you don't have at times the time to look and go, what do we now need to put in place to be able to do these things? So we certainly made errors in judgment along the way. We made some monumental fuck-ups, but fortunately the things that we did do right were more than the things we did wrong to be able to grow. And I know we've talked about it before, having the foundations right, doing your growth, setting your foundations again for the next stage of growth, etc., is a constant within a business. And fortunately we had the foresight to be able to do that, to continue to be able to grow and learn from the errors, which a lot of the time you'll take on board, you'll put in your belt, but you don't look at them again until it happens again. Go, fuck, yeah, this reminds me, I've done it again.
Before.
Yeah, Ooh, there's a bit of a wound.
Yeah. And so, that trajectory for you guys over a decade or so, you were saying off air, but it'd be great to sort of talk through that again, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, and beyond. Like, take us through that kind of, that journey, because
the emotional journey that is revenue and the balance sheet.
Yeah.
Look, for your listeners, it doesn't matter if you're a startup or where you are in your business journey. When you're a startup and you get to 10,000, 100,000, they are monumental steps.
Yeah.
And once you've done your first million, and I don't mean that to sound fickle in any way, you celebrate that, and then you get to 5. And you go, wow, we are seriously kicking some ass now. You get to 10, and I've got a midgie around me. Nothing like live radio. You get to, sort of 10 million, and you go, wow, we are a big business now.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you get to 50, and again, I don't mean to sound, sort of flippant, but you get to 100, and then it doesn't matter. 200, 300, whatever it is, it then becomes a number. You feel great about it, but you lose sight of some of those things because all of a sudden you've got a bigger team that you're responsible for.
Yeah.
And that that's responsibility.
Yes.
And But yeah, I certainly know the celebrations that we used to do, and certainly in my current business, we cracked 410,000 for the month last month, and you celebrate those things because that takes a team effort. So
huge team effort. Let's sort of talk about that, folks. Everyone listening in, Heather's being very, limited here in the explanation, 100 million, 200 million, and beyond in the turnover. And I just want to maybe sort of go back to that, and before we move on to anything else, for you, as that was starting to become, I'd call it a beast of its own, where do you see in that journey, maybe, looking back on it now, where some of the cracks started to show maybe for, your partnership with Gary, and, were there any other things? For me as a business owner, I feel in the past some of the mistakes I'd like to go back and fix, but if you did, you probably wouldn't have the lessons. Some of the sacrifices I thought that were smart at the time, I look back and go, I wish I would have chose something maybe differently if I had a chance, maybe with my kids or with my partner or whatever. As that beast took on a life of its own, like you said, you're strapped into this rocket.
Yeah, look, and I think it's one of those funny things. When you're in it, you're doing what you think is right, and no one sets out to do something that isn't going to work for your family, more so.
Yeah.
And Gary and I were working together, and as you know, that is a challenge in itself. Walking in through the front door and then going, business no longer is at work, and now it's family.
It's everywhere.
That is a really hard thing to do, and we didn't do it well or at all. Because by that stage we had some of our children were in the business. So that flows all the way through, and at the time we weren't wise enough or mature enough or whatever it was. And I think because it was always part of our business that door never finished, that it just became that evolution of conversation. So one of my massive takeaways from that was having that separation and that boundary, and having the maturity to one, put the boundary in, and two, hold the boundary, because that you can put anything in, but if you don't stick to it, that becomes sort of the key. So that was a really big thing for us, because ultimately where you're working your ass off and you think, I'm doing this for my family, if you're not there for your family, by the time they all go and you go, but hang on a sec, guys, I've actually been working my ass off to actually give you these things. They actually just want your time. They want your presence. And that's a challenge to stand back from that when you've got responsibilities to, your team members, your mortgage, all those other things, because you go, I'll just do this and then I'll have the reality is all those things will still be there. Just take the time. Take
some extra time. Good little bit of advice for those listening in.
Indeed.
Don't be in such a rush. And in those times of those amazing growth periods for you guys, how many team members did you have on board as you grew the business?
We went from 8 to over 1,000.
Over 1,000 people, and
I think the tipping point for me to know everybody was around the 300 mark. And then you'd sort of go, and you wouldn't mean it disrespectfully, but you'd sort of say, and sorry, who are you and what do you do? Oh, there's another person. Great. So that becomes a challenge in itself. And, it's the old adage, make sure that it gets back to your foundations. What are you here for? What are you doing? What's your purpose? Where do you want to go? And what are your values? And at the time, ours were, not as rigorous as what they should have been, and we hired incorrectly.
But also too, you were saying that some of the values you guys worked with was a little bit of an advantage for your recruitment and sometimes in competition, because you guys were known to have a bit more fun than others.
So you when you realise that you need those things, and then you put them into your employment contracts, and that's what you hire and fire on. There was some funny times, and one of them being out west.
And you said you're always hands on in some of these mining camps and expansions and so on, you're always out and about, making sure that things were happening on those mining camps. Like how many people at a time were out there in the middle of literally nowhere often, wasn't it?
Bumfuck Idaho.
Yeah, that's the
I'm
one.
sure they don't want to. I'm sure they don't want to be caught injuring as Bumfuck Idaho. But that's where we were, on greenfield sites.
Yeah.
And one thing, if you're asking people to do things that is a real step up, the best way to actually get them to rise to the occasion is to be out there with them.
Yeah.
Doing it, and I don't mind putting on the high vis and the steel caps, and it actually gets you back to the roots of the business. And obviously, anyone in construction understands that you can have an office full of people, sort of managing the projects, but if you haven't got the guys out in the field building the stuff, you've actually got no business. So we were out there and on greenfield site and the challenges that went with that logistically and sort of manpower and all those things and internet and Jace, I know we've talked about it and I shared a story where internet was that poor out there that I was getting around with a hard hat on and the guys would strap me to a forklift and we were being safe. I was strapped in. Yeah, I was being strapped in appropriately, but they strapped me to the forks of the forklift, put me at full tilt up the top. I had my aerial on my hard hat and they created a little notepad thing for me and I'd go up there, get all my messages, ring back who I had to and it was a bit of a joke because I'd do that, sort of every day, and every now and again I'd forget to swap my hard hat out, and I'd be walking around looking like bloody R2D2 around the site, so I'd look like a bit of a knob. But they sort of go, here's a chick, she's the director of the business, and we're sort of turning over significant amounts, and you're not too far from the sun to still get out and do what you had to do to make the business work. So
well, and let's talk about that for a second because the industry, building industry, mining industry, largely male dominated, and it sounds like your experience in there was, you got your hands dirty as much as anyone else, and the team around you respected that. Was that something you set out to do on purpose, or was that something you kind of kept front of mind for you? Like, probably putting it in context for, some of the entrepreneurial ladies listening in right now, maybe some advice or some feedback on how it worked.
So, one of the biggest pieces of advice is, from a construction perspective, females will always get on site, and I alluded to that earlier, but you've got to know your shit.
Yeah.
So, be respectful of the fact of the knowledge that you want them or what you're sharing. And I guess it goes back to when I talked about the CSR days. How do you understand what's happening if if you're too far away from the sun or too far away from the game and always sitting in the corporate box, how much are you actually getting to see? So, not being that far away that you can't go down and sort of, that's the best litmus test you can do in any business is, go to the people that are actually doing the work and see what they're saying and doing is actually coming back up to you, because the bigger your business gets, the greater the filter between, at the coalface to you becomes, because, sometimes people can tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
Well, the best way to hear what you want to hear is actually go and deal with the people that are doing it.
See, and do you reckon that was maybe one of the little secrets for you guys to, create that success? You were never too afraid to get down there and chat to everyone on the front line and really get some honest feedback? We were definitely an employer of choice. We looked after our people, sort of incredibly well. I haven't obviously been in the business for some time now, but I would, hope and expect that those values continue. But that certainly set us apart, and we used to get people that would come and work for us and they'd go, we really want to be here because of the way that you treat, everybody. So yeah, awesome. And one story, if you wouldn't mind sharing just quickly about your, you were saying at one point you bought an aeroplane, like bought a jet. You went to America, flew it back, and you had this like crazy surreal moment. Like share a little bit of that, because I find that stuff fascinating, right? Country town, and then I don't know, 15, 20, 30 years later, buying a jet and flying around the world like the...
So it was a King Air 250, actually. And so it was the first one coming to Australia at the time. And so we bought a plane. We were in a position to be able to do that, and logistically we were being challenged by getting sort of people around. So it was a 10-seater. It's a funny story. Flew to America, Wichita, right in the middle of redneck America, and we had some sort of challenges, sort of getting there, and my luggage didn't quite make the plane, and then there was a little man that we flew American Airlines, and the plane had we were taxiing, and then next minute this little guy is waving at the side and he's going, stop, and it's like, oh, that's my bag, quick, stop. So the plane did literally stop, threw my bag in, and off we went. So we get to Wichita, and there is no way ever on a bucket list could you ever say, well, on my bucket list I'm going to buy a plane, I'm going to fly to Wichita, and I'm going to fly back in the plane. It's just not something that would even be on your bucket list. So I was very, very fortunate to be able to do that, and we had a ferry pilot that came with us, and we were in Walmart getting some supplies, and I had never been to a Walmart at the time, and he tore his piece of paper, gave me half a list and him half a list, and he said, right, this is what we need, and we've got a time limit. And I went, oh my God, how this, anyone that's been to a Walmart, or if you haven't, it's like a Bunnings on it, with about 16 other sizes in amongst it. So being the Aussie and a problem solver, I went and found somebody and said, hi, I'm from Australia and I need these things. And this lady she had a microphone, so she goes, shoppers, we've got this Aussie, Heather, and we're going to help her find what she's wanting. And my ferry pilot, he was up the other end, and he goes, of course she fucking is. So anyway, I got my list long before him, and it's like, come on, Al, now you're holding us up. So we had, a bit of a riot. Got on our plane, again, quite surreal, and we flew from there to Montreal to fuel up, and nearly got put in the clink because we didn't quite pass the...
you landed illegally, right?
We tried to ring. We tried to ring the authorities. They didn't answer. And
we'll land anyway.
Yeah, we'll land anyway. So I said to Al, pop the lid, which is, put the door down. I was, needed to go inside, and off I went. And when we left Wichita, I was in a singlet top and shorts. And when we got to Montreal, it was like minus fucking 30. And so I ran inside, got a cup of tea, went to the loo, started to come out, hear all these sirens, and these two burly guys came in and confronted us and said, what are you doing? And it's like, getting a cup of tea. And he goes, no, what are you doing? What are you doing here? Oh, we're just fueling. Well, you didn't ring. Yes, we did. Look, here's the thing. Come in the plane. No, you stay where you are. And anyway, it was a lesson in how to talk really quickly, because they threatened to lock us up. And anyway, they didn't, and we went on our way. And then part of the trip, you stop along the way, but the absolute never happen in your life again was going over Greenland. And my ferry pilot said to me, he used to fly for Cathay Pacific, and he said, I've never got to see Greenland up close because it's always cloudy. And I said, mate, all you have to do is set the intention and you just part the clouds and we'll get to see it. So 2 nautical miles out, it started to part, and he goes, look at this, here we go. And I said, let's get on to Radio Greenland and see if we can come and have a look. And he said, Heather, you can't do those things. Well, that's like a red rag to a bull. And so I jumped on the radio, Victor Hotel, Foxtrot, Kilo Bravo, Radio Greenland. We're flying over your country. The clouds have parted and we'd love to have a closer look. Can we drop down to 15,000 feet? And crackle. And he goes, oh, see, you shouldn't have done that. And they came back and they gave us approval. So
well, there you go.
Yeah, down we dropped, and, photos can never do what we saw justice, but one of those things in your life
once
that
in a lifetime.
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
Yeah. I think the Montreal people forwarded and they said, "Listen, Heather Gardner's on her way
I know.
from Australia. Let her through."
Indeed. So we got to Iceland, and I'd never been to Iceland, it was quite funny because we pulled up, we went through customs, they have little private ones, and the guy was there and he put a little date stamp and I went, mate, are you serious? I'm in Iceland and that's all I get, a little date stamp. And he got out this other stamp and it's a map of Iceland and it says approved. And I went, oh, that's so much better.
That's what I'm looking for. Yeah.
Indeed. So, yeah, that was a bit surreal.
Yeah. And crazy times, mate, you know, and it sounds like, you know, those things are certainly ones you'll lock away in the vault forever. And yeah, obviously, I'm sure you're telling your grandchildren when it's appropriate to tell those stories.
Yeah, not what to do.
Yeah. But, you know, let's sort of maybe, you know, shift gears into that phase where, you know, maybe that chapter was coming to an end. Look, what was the start of that for you guys? And, you moved on from the business, you moved on from that partnership. You know, give us a little bit of a...
Yeah, so after Gary and I separated, I actually stayed in the business for I think it was about 18 months, and you do those. You make the decision that you need to do at the time.
Yep.
When it was such a big part of your life, I needed that time to be able to extract myself out.
Yep.
And you know, sort of find my way. So when I think it was a bit by mutual agreement, you need to go, I need to stay. You know, fortunately, we were still able to, you know, be in the same room and do all those things. And I say quite regularly, you know, Gary and I divorced, but we didn't divorce, you know, sort of the kids and the responsibilities that go with that.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, sort of a really big thing when you've got a blended family or any family, I guess. It's that all of those emotional things that go with it.
Yeah.
You know, if you pull on one thread, the whole bed can fall apart, or the whole, you know, thing can fall apart. And it's not about, you know, not pulling on those threads, but just being adult, because at the end of the day, there's more people that you know, you can impact by doing it. Maybe not the, you know, anything that's highly emotive like that. You can easily take a different path versus taking a more adult grown-up path.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, these days you're still in talking terms with everyone, seeing all the 17 grandchildren.
Yeah, some of them I don't get to see as often, but, you know, we've got a farm, Johnny and I, my partner, we've got a farm down at Telgum, northern New South Wales, and, yeah, the kids love coming, you know, down there, back to the simple life.
Visiting Nan. Is it Nan?
Nanny H. Nanny H. I'm the cool one.
The cool Nan. Well, you know, and so, you know, that was a chapter, you know, an amazing chapter for you. You know, what sprung from that at that point was, you know, did you know, take a rest for a while, or did you say, well, no, I've got plenty left to do and grasp something and get into it? What was the sort of transition for you? Because you've had you've got two successful businesses in recent times. So, you know, when did you sort of launch back in and grab those things by the horns?
by the horns, or whatever else you want to call. Look, afterwards, you know, there was a bit of a transition period, because when you've been in such a high, would you say high demand, or integral to a business at the time, and then all of a sudden, you know, you go to nothing. It was, and any of your solopreneurs out there that have had significant businesses and then go back to a startup, I fully appreciate, because I was sitting there, I remember I set up a property trust, and I thought to myself, I'll just delegate that. And I turned around, and of course there was no one there, so I actually had to put mirrors behind myself. So when I turn around to delegate, it was like, oh, of course you're doing it, Heather. So that was a really big change. You know, when you've got significant number of people and resources behind you, and then you're the one doing all the do. Yeah. So it took me a little while to, you know, sort of work out what I wanted to do.
Was that a tough transition for you? Like, did you struggle at that point? Or was it just a bit of a natural process for you? Yeah, different.
Look, I wouldn't. Anything that you want to put a label on is hard. Yeah. Versus, it was what it was, because, you know, as Peter Crone said, it was what it was because that's exactly what happened. Yeah. You know, could I have handled it better? I don't think so, because I didn't. Yeah. Did I cry? Fuck, absolutely. You know, did I laugh? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was finding that balance, and I guess really getting, you know, get to know yourself. Yeah. Who am I without that? So
'Cause sometimes we have an identity attached to those things, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, that was certainly an adjustment period. And then my stepson approached me to he wanted to get into training, and it was an interesting transition because he wanted to, he couldn't afford to buy a business, I could. So I bought a shell of one that just had some contracts, and it was an embroidery and fashion design. And I wanted, my passion has always been in construction. So your listeners might say, how do you take a fashion and design and embroidery business to a construction side? And we just, sort of added scope, pulled out the things that weren't there. He was going to run it for me. And I think the lesson in that is it unfortunately didn't work out. We had a values disconnect. And that's always a challenge, when you've got children, and it's irrelevant whether or not they're stepchildren, your biological children or whatever, they're still your family.
Yes.
And if that doesn't necessarily work out as well, that can, sort of create some issues, and it certainly did for us. So I ended up getting the business back and went, fuck, I actually know nothing about training. How hard could it be? Seriously. And everyone used to talk in acronyms. So I put together an acronym book, a glossary, and no one was allowed to use an acronym that wasn't in the glossary, and it had to be approved before they did. And I really had to reflect on why was I in that space? What made that something that I could actually do?
Yeah.
And I'd spoken to some people, sort of still from, sort of historical, and I said to them, God, I've got this bloody business. I don't really know what I'm going to do with it. And they said, for God's sake, Heather, you always used to say somebody needs to deliver quality training. You're in the space, do something about it. And it's like, oh, wow, so that became then something that I could actually attach to.
So you transitioned it into the construction world for training and that sort of stuff. That's, yeah.
So within the space that I used to work, so
Yes.
civil and construction, and went, okay, I can actually make a difference in the lives of the people that we deal with. So it was like, yeah, I can actually, and do it in a kick-ass way,
And then, you guys have been going strength to strength in the last bunch of years and
Well, the funny part about that is, you look at your balance sheet when you first buy a shell of a business, and there's zero assets, zero income, and zero liability. So you sort of go, well, happy days. You stuff it full of things because I didn't have the experience, I had the experience in business. I didn't have the knowledge within that space. Got people in that I believed did because they knew more than me at the time, and discovered that if people were taught the wrong way, they're going to bring the wrong way into your business, and that's exactly what I got. So I used a broom twice over a 2-year period, and went, wow, I've got to get better at this. I've got to educate myself in the space that I'm in and actually get serious about it. And when I made that conscious decision, that's when we actually went from brackets and minuses on the balance sheet, and we finally ticked over a profit in July after 3.5 years. So we do celebrate those things. Absolutely. So I've gone from sort of 200, 300, 400 million dollar balance sheets into minus 100, minus 200, minus 300, and we're obviously clawing that back. So I've been on both sides and fully appreciate what it's like when you're starting a business again. So
both sides of those fences. And these days, do you bring a bit more balance? Maybe that's not the right word, but to your approach now. As you're approaching this stuff, you're still passionate about entrepreneurialism. You're getting up each day, really going after what you're passionate about, but you bring a sort of more of a values balance to it. You think?
Oh, without a doubt. We select our clients based on values. A lot of people can talk about their values.
Yeah.
And I certainly know as we were entering this space, and make no mistake, the vet sector has been bastardised by a lot of businesses that have done the wrong thing. And I was actually only talking to a colleague yesterday, and they said, we're over the vet sector and, these dodgy fuckers. And it's like, mate, but, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. There will always be people that will find a loophole and the wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
But, know in your heart that you're doing the right thing, and eventually my mantra is eventually the truth will come out.
Yeah.
And if you've done the right thing, people will be attracted to that. And we've certainly rejected clients based on the fact that their values don't align with ours. They see that as being, you need the work, but it's like I'd much rather not have the work and hold my integrity than take the work, and because you only ever get to sell it once.
Yeah, it's a great takeaway. Yeah, so someone told me that one a long time ago. I can't remember where it came, but it was like a reputation takes a lifetime to build and a moment to lose.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
and and I think that's one of the things that has been the biggest insight over the last little while is COVID. All these things can make people do things that they ordinarily wouldn't do. And my attitude is this is the time that you actually need to stay to your values, because you never get that back.
Yeah.
And and I fully understand, probably a lot of your listeners may have been, affected by it. But when everything else is gone, you've just got your own integrity and your own conscience to live with. So do it right the first time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the next bugger that comes in your body has got some shit to fix.
The karma that you're leaving behind.
Exactly.
Clean it up as you go along.
Yeah, they end up with 10-ton Tessie to fix up.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that your business, Foundation Training Australia, based on values, is going to continue to grow. I know it will, with you at the helm and leading in an amazing way. So. I'm excited to see that happen, but changed gear a little bit. Maybe call it the third quarter or a third chapter in your life now. You're balancing
the third trimester.
It
is like birthing a baby.
It is like birthing a baby. Well, it's true, isn't it? Because sometimes I think, certainly for me, I felt our business, because Shay and I, my partner in business together, us well. It would feel like the business was another child, almost one of those demanding, out of control children sometimes taking all the attention, and you're like, how did I get here with this such a dysfunctional, exchange going on? So
absolutely,
and
I'm sure any of your listeners that have got a business probably feel like exactly like that.
Yeah,
because it is demanding, and it is where you put all your energy. Even though we like to say, we're balancing our life, but I guess the key is you can only do that for so long, and then you've got to sort of give yourself the time.
Yeah. And so this podcast is called The Wealth Faculty, and I was sort of chatting to you off air about a bit of a dual spin on that, the faculties that you bring, your physical, your spiritual, your mental, your emotional health to the things that you pursue and love and passionate about. What are some of the practices that you've sort of implemented to stay healthy and energetic and stuff over the years? What's been keeping you going? Is there something that's always been a theme in there, or what is it for you?
Hiking's probably one of the biggest themes. So
outdoors, nature.
Yeah. So as soon as you're outdoors and you're doing those, humans are so connected to nature, but we become so disconnected to it. The evolution of what they do, and I love all the references to nature. You don't see trees that hold on to their dead leaves. That is so relevant for humans that if something's dead or no longer serving you in your life, let it go. Because something more beautiful will come in its place. Sort of when it's supposed to.
Yeah.
So I love all the references to nature, and certainly over the years we've travelled New Zealand and done a heap of the hikes. Obviously the Kokoda track, Mont Blanc. There's been a lot of things where you get out and just really connect back and just clear your head. So that's been pretty much a constant. And obviously our farm.
You brought a farm just recently, and
so
and you're transitioning
just
from
up the road
city.
from you.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're neighbours, we're neighbours in the country sense anyway. And
indeed.
you've transitioning out of city and
got my
got
unit
your
on the
property
market.
Yeah.
And we're as you know, we're in a caravan down at our farm, and we've obviously spoken about it. It's really easy to adjust into the simple things, and you work out when you've actually got a wardrobe which is only 300 wide. And can only
300
hold
millimeters wide.
Yes, 300 millimeters wide, and can only hold sort of a swan dry, a coat, and maybe 2 dresses, and maybe pack your undies in down the bottom somewhere. That all of a sudden, all the things that you had, you don't need, and that's always a bit of a challenge to shed those things.
Yeah.
But I guess one of the constants that we've always played Monopoly with the kids, and I think it's a great tool for anybody to actually help their kids learn about money and property and those things, negotiation skills and so forth. And then obviously, there's a myriad of other type of games out there. But I remember when my partner John joined our family and we on Sundays we would play Monopoly and have a bottle of wine with my kids are obviously adult children, and he'd say, "Oh my God, you guys are so competitive. I don't know that I can actually operate in this family." And but that's the lovely part about it. It's all those negotiation skills, and if you can hone them with your family, you can do it out in the real world.
You get to do that at the farm, unplug a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And COVID was a classic of being able to do that. We didn't need an office in Brisbane anymore, and you get to reevaluate, what is important, and things aren't property, wealth, and those things are obviously you still need income, and certainly I've had conversations with my adult children, and intergenerational wealth becomes one of those things to be able to work toward, and it starts with one property.
Yeah.
You don't have to have hundreds of millions of dollars. It actually starts with one property.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people get confused. I can't do this because you can. Just start smaller.
And is that something that's high on the agenda for you now? Like being that custodian and passing some intergenerational wealth on, and other things. I know you're pretty passionate about supporting charities and other really good ideas. Is that something that you're focusing on now as part of the next 5-10 years for you? Maybe this legacy idea.
Yeah, and legacy is always one of those things, isn't it? That if I could the biggest lesson I would love to pass on to anybody is make people appreciate the value of the dollar. And now everything's bloody tap and go, so they have no idea how much money they're spending, which can be a real trap. But appreciate what money actually buys, and it and people will say, I don't want money, or I've got enough money, or all these things. Money makes things easier, but it's not the be all and end all, because you can have a small amount of money and be as happy as a clam. You can have a lot of money and be as miserable as fuck.
Yeah.
So there are those differences. So for me, it's now about how can I as an individual be a custodian of that intergenerational wealth, but not create issues that be it grandchildren, children end up being reliant on on what they think they're going to get, and that to me would be a real travesty. That if and certainly my kids wouldn't, but you hear it from time where you've got some reasonable net worth, and their parent and kids will go, well, it doesn't matter because when mum and dad dies or this person dies, I get that. That's pretty. I wouldn't like that. So to have it in a controlled environment is a lot better, and giving back, as you said, I'm on the board of Multicap. I don't have any disability connection, but I bring a wealth of really good general business, because if we're not doing what we do well, then a whole bunch of people are affected. So and it's time to give back. You don't get to this stage and then go, well, I'm going to keep all that. That's my
Yeah.
sort of option and my view. Not everyone sort of has those.
Yeah.
But and give it freely, but don't waste my fucking time and
Yeah.
pick my brain and not sort of do anything with it. And I actually said it at a seminar once that someone said to me, what's your definition of success? And I think people can actually get caught up on that. Oh, it's when I've got this much money, or it's when I've got this.
Yeah.
Success starts the minute you are born. And if you think about little balls of cotton wool and you have a basket and over your lifetime you collect these little balls of wool. I start to walk, I get my first tooth, I go to school, I go to preschool, whatever it is, have my first kiss, I have my first, sexual relationship. I was going to say have first root, but I thought I would not.
I was like, yes, go Heather.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you get married, you have kids. All those are success balls in my view. So if you're collecting those in your basket, by the time you get to, sort of 56 or 35 or wherever you are, you have got this beautiful success ball of things that you have done, and it's not defined by money. That to me that's success, because you've lived your life how you've and valued those little things.
Great way to measure. Great way to absolutely.
Yeah, there'll be a big sale on cotton wool balls now.
and along the journey, amazing journey for your life, and I reckon there's some pretty exciting chapters to come too, by the sounds of things. But so far, who has been on your faculty to help you along the way? Like, you can name them in profession or name them in person, but, who are the people that you've relied on for, help in tough times, guidance, direction, support, for those listening at home, sometimes we feel like we're always alone, but, often you do have to seek out others to support you sometimes. What did you do?
So in my younger years, you just sucked it up.
Yeah.
I never had a mentor, and I didn't. And it's not because I didn't want to. I actually just didn't know how to go about that.
Yeah, okay.
And ultimately, you ask.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. Will you ask? Or will you ask the person? And as I sort of got to the last probably 10 years. I went and did an MBA to solidify what I knew in my mind, and then I actually went to seek out some professional organisations to be able to sort of support that. Certainly through a business journey at the time, Gary and I obviously relied on each other. We had a network of friends that were in business.
Yep.
But I must say it was probably a bit shallow, conversationally wise. I sort of if you're a female and friends of mine were in YPO, Young Professionals Organisation, and I thought, wow, I'll actually do that. Well, there was a problem. I'm a drip dry, not a flip dry, and therefore you actually had to have the male, and then as part of that, the female got to sort of join, and I thought that was a bit shit because at the time, I didn't have a male that was in my life that was in business. So that was out for me. I then went and sought out some other professional organisations, and ultimately where I've sort of ended up is in K2, which has been without a doubt the place, I suppose, where you feel most comfortable. Because everyone's there, no bullshit, and you can actually speak freely, and it's supportive at whatever level that you are. So had I known that something like that wasn't available in my growing years, or if it did, I wasn't aware of it, and therefore I didn't seek it out. So I think everyone finds what they need at the time. So found home, so to speak, in a professional level.
Yes.
That also supports the personal stuff, and a great place to be able to impart some of that knowledge.
They're giving back, and it sounds like that's part of your journey now. Is that I want to give back in whatever way I can. It's an interesting one because I love that little nuance there. It's like not about getting to a finish line and retiring and that's it, I'm spent or done. It's like, no, I've accumulated so much cool stuff. Now can I give back? Can I add value, wherever I can.
Well, our purpose for Foundation Training Australia is enriching lives through education, and it wasn't until the other day, and it's sort of like, oh my God, why didn't you see that coming? And I was having that conversation with somebody personally, and they said, oh my God, you've just enriched my life through the education that you just told me. And I went, holy shit, that's my business one. Oh my God, it's mine too.
Yeah.
And it's quite funny because, I think people can get caught up a lot of the time. What is my personal purpose?
Yeah.
Your personal purpose is to evolve as a human and do a fucking good job of it.
Yeah.
That's it, and so I have a far simpler view of life. But when you're in your prime, let me say, of your career growth, I was like a samurai sword. Get out of my way, or I'd cut your head off. Thank God I've mellowed.
Yeah, well, I certainly know that the energy you bring to the K2 community is certainly welcome, and it's a strong energy and it's a beautiful energy too. So I enjoy the time that we spend together. But last question today, Heather. Been awesome to chat with you on the podcast. But what's the true meaning of wealth to you right now?
Oh, that's a multi-dimensional question, isn't it? And for me, it's actually not about economics. And I know, and I don't want your listeners to think that that's being flippant at all. It is a richness of life that actually is the wealth, and our opportunity to be able to just sit and be comfortable. I was asked a question the other day, and we had to provide one word, I am, and mine was, I am me. That's it. That's wealth.
Heather Gardner, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you very much. Been a privilege. And he made me cry right at the end, the bugger.
Hey, thanks for joining us on The Wealth Faculty. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe. Where all good podcasts are found, you can find us there. And if you want to watch it, you can subscribe on YouTube, Positive Mentor TV. And until the next episode, take care. Bye for now.